This video is brought to you by MagicJank.com, the spiciest cards for your sauciest decks. Buy and sell Magic the Gathering products and gear today on MagicJank.com. What is up, Janksters? It's your boy Graham, also known as HamHawks42 on the internet, and today we are talking about Jumpstart 2022 spoilers. Now, Jumpstart 2022 is a product that's going to be releasing actually later this week, as of this recording, on December 2nd, and in it will include a number of new cards. There are 51 cards that are mechanically unique we have never seen before. Now, this particular product, it's meant to be a limited environment where new players can really get into the game in fun, cool ways by simply taking 2 booster packs, cracking them open, shuffling them together into a 40-card deck, and playing the game. It's actually a really cool product. I'm glad they're doing it, and that's all fine and good, but in order to sell this product to enfranchise players, they have included 51 brand new cards that we have never seen before. Now, if you're familiar with cards like Mizzix, Goblin Grandee, that is an example of a card that was introduced in a Jumpstart standalone product. So maybe not the best example to get you excited for the cards that I'm about to present, unless you are yourself a Goblin player. I don't believe we have anything quite that powerful here, but at the same time, we're going to dive in and we're going to see. Now, I know I'm actually a little bit late to the party on these, so thank you for your patience as we get into it. Also, just candidly, it has been a number of days since my last video that I posted on YouTube, which I know is long enough to declare a YouTuber legally dead, but I would be remiss if I did not jump into these cards and do my typical overthinking deep dive into these new cards and see what they're like. The Jumpstart product will also include just a wide variety of reprints, like 800 different reprints. We are not talking about those today. If you want to get your hands on a Karn Liberated with artwork that looks like it's out of Full Metal Alchemist, that's a thing. You can do that. And I encourage you to, because why not? It's fun. But that's not ultimately not what we're here to do today. We're here today to talk about brand new cards. So without further ado, let's get into it. First up, we have Agrus Kos, Eternal Soldier. And hopefully someday I will learn if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I've not quite gotten there. This character was actually a character in original Ravnica, like the very first go around to Ravnica back in 2004, I think it was. Agrus Kos was there as one of the leaders of the Boros Legion. And if I'm not mistaken, he actually died in the story and his ghost was a player. So here we are. We see the Spirit Soldier of Agrus Kos. It's a Spirit Soldier, 3 and a white, legendary. For a 3/4 vigilance, whenever Agrus Kos Eternal Soldier becomes the target of an ability that targets only it, you may pay 1 and a Boros hybrid, so either red or white. If you do, copy that ability for each other creature you control that ability could target. Each copy targets a different one of those creatures. So pretty cool. Now, it is a May effect. You don't have to do this. So if your opponent has a creature that ETBs and destroys target creature, you don't have to wipe your whole team, although you could pay 2 and do that. I don't know. I wouldn't recommend it. But the way that this is really beneficial to you is if you have buffs on abilities. So what that means is this does not copy spells, so keep that in mind. So if you cast a combat trick like a Giant Growth or a Defiant Strike or anything like that, that just gives one targeted thing a buff, this does not interact with that at all. However, if you have a Planeswalker, like an Elspeth Resplendent, that has a +1 ability that says target creature gets a +1/+1 counter and your choice of a number of keyword counters, you could target Agrus Kos with that +1 ability, pay 2, and you would copy the ability a ton of times based on however many other creatures you have that are eligible targets for it, which is awesome, frankly. And the value that you could get out of this if you built a deck around it is just to the moon. Now, in the Planeswalker example, I want to point out, in that particular case, if you're using a Planeswalker ability to trigger this, you do not get loyalty counters for each time you copy the ability, because the loyalty counters are part of the cost to activate. So those don't duplicate. So you can't use this to speed run a Planeswalker alt. You would use this though to buff your entire team and give all of them flying or lifelink or vigilance or whatever the keyword of choice is. And I think you could even mix it up, because I believe you would get to choose per resolution of the ability, which is awesome. So this thing's fascinating. It's super powerful. I would also want to combine this with, there are plenty of budget cards out there that could synergize with this that you may not have thought of. The first one that came to my mind was Traveling Minister. It's from one of our recent sets, recently returned to Innistrad. It's a little, I believe, 0-1 for 1. And you can tap, give target creature +1/+0, and gain 1 life. So what you're doing there is you target Agrus with that. You pay 2. Now your entire team gets +1/+0, which is fine, but you also gain 1 life for each creature you control. And each one of those instances of life gain is its own standalone occurrence, which means if you have an Ajani's Pridemate or a Vice of the Blessed down, it would trigger, or a Heliod, it would trigger for every single one of those. So the synergies here are just to the moon, and you could do some really crazy stuff with this. So I think this card's actually like super powerful, and I have a feeling in the limited environment of Jumpstart, it's going to be fine, but there are going to be commander players that really abuse this to really phenomenal effect. So heads up for that. That's definitely going to be a thing, and I'm looking forward to it. I think this is pretty fun. All right, next card. Angelic Cub. This is a 1/1 cat angel creature for 1 and a white. And whenever Angelic Cub becomes the target of a spell or ability for the first time each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on it. As long as Angelic Cub has 3 or more +1/+1 counters on it, it has flying. This strikes me as probably in the same pack as Agrus. I would be shocked if they're not, because they both want you to be targeting your own stuff with abilities. Although Angelic Cub also triggers off of spells. So if you have pump spells like the aforementioned Defiant Strike, Giant Growth, that kind of thing, you can pump this too. So decent. Like, I don't love it. It's not an amazing card. The fact that it needs 3 counters in order to get flying is a little bit of a bummer, because you really want that thing lifting off as soon as possible. And a 1/1 for 2, yeah, granted, it's going to grow. It's going to grow pretty fast, I would imagine. But even so, a 1/1 for 2 is fairly vulnerable for the moment it's on the field. So I don't imagine this making a lot of waves outside of like maybe an Agrus Kos commander deck, because if you open them in a pack, you probably get both. So cool. But yeah, I don't know. It's fine. It's a cool design. I like the idea of, you know, rewarding you for targeting your own stuff, because aggressive decks that want to be winning in the trenches in combat probably have combat tricks and things like that in it already. So getting a little bit of a bonus for using them is nice. I like that. So cool card. Nice little bread and butter uncommon for that strategy. All right, next up, Chains of Custody. This is an aura for 2 and a white. Enchant creature you control. When Chains of Custody enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent and opponent controls until Chains of Custody leaves the battlefield. Enchant a creature has ward 2. I don't like this. I don't like this at all. It's a neat design, and I can imagine in Limited it's going to be pretty good. But this is a strictly worse Banishing Light. So Banishing Light style effects or Oblivion Ring style effects are when you play an enchantment and then you exile a thing until that enchantment leaves. That's pretty standard practice. The fact that this is an aura that's stable to a creature means that if that creature dies, this goes away and they get the thing back. So it makes that creature much less useful to you, because all of a sudden you're not as likely to be attacking with it or blocking with it, for that matter. Because even if a block looks favorable, if an opponent has a combat trick or something, they can blow you out even more. So this looks to me like a trap, like a trappity trap. I think this is, if you're playing Jumpstart and you have it, it's perfectly fine removal, but do not play this outside of that environment. You're gonna, like, this is gonna be a lesson to a lot of new players about, you know, picking your removal carefully, because this is bad. This is very, very bad. And I try to be pretty positive about my feedback on cards and try to find the good. It doesn't exist here. It's not good. No, this is very bad. All right, next up, Distinguished Conjurer. This is a human wizard 1/2 for 1 and a white. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. And you can pay 4 and a white, tap, exile another target creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. This is doing a ton of stuff I really, really like. Although, to be fair, so this is a Soul Warden type of effect. I say Soul Warden. Soul Warden is a little bit better because it triggers on your opponent's creatures too. This only triggers on the ones you control. And it's a little fixed in that regard, because gaining 1 life every time one of your creatures enters is good and can give you a really big advantage throughout the course of the game, especially if you're banking on life gain triggers in some way. And there are a million different ways to do this. There are so many creatures that have that ability stapled onto it. It is just insane. Like, I'm actually kind of curious if I went to Scryfall right now and did just a search on that text, how many cards I would get. It's probably a fair amount. Between green and white, probably, yeah, quite a few. But, so, it doesn't affect that is a tried and true static effect. It's good, we know it's good. And then, to have a blink attached to it is pretty fantastic. I mean, the joke is, like, I can pay 5, maybe untap one of my things and gain 1 life. Whee! But anybody who's played with blink effects know you're gonna get more than that. Because the creature that you're blinking is gonna have some crazy end of the battlefield trigger. It just is. That's how you abuse this type of effect. And so as a result, this is an uncommon that I think is actually gonna be pretty good. Like in Commander, just having the ability to at will blink something at instant speed, even for 5 mana. Like 5 mana is a lot. But if you're targeting something, especially if your opponent's like trying to remove something and then you just like trip this, they get denied the removal, you get the other ETB trigger, and you gain a life on top of it. Like, it's all good. Now, it can't touch itself. Keep in mind, that's very important. This actually reminds me of like a fixed Displacer Kitten. Displacer Kitten is a card from Baldur's Gate that whenever you cast a spell, you get to blink a permanent you control, which is just astronomically stupid. Like, that card is insane. Just insanely powerful. Like, it's super good. Like, way too good, frankly. Because when it hits the battlefield, the whole game becomes about it. Every single time. No matter what format you're in. If you're in Historic on Arena, and Displacer Kitten shows up, you need to do every single thing you can do to remove it. And I'll tell you right now, it's not going to be enough because it can protect itself. Distinguished Conjurer cannot protect itself. So this feels like a fixed Displacer Kitten, but at the same time, that effect is that ability, this ability to blink a creature, that's worth 5 mana. Believe it or not. It doesn't read like it is, but it absolutely is if you deploy it correctly. So good stuff. I like it. All right, next up, Ingenious Leonin. 4/4 cat soldier for 4 and a white. You can pay 3 and a white, put a +1/+1 counter on another target attacking creature you control. If that creature is a cat, it gains first strike until end of turn. This seems like a really decent limited card. And by that I mean, if you're in an environment where card choice is limited, like limited such as draft or sealed. So if you're in the Jumpstart packs and you have 2 packs and you've shuffled them together and one of them is a cat-themed deck, and you have Ingenious Leonin, it's probably going to do some good work for you. A 4/4 body is nothing to scoff at. Your opponent has to respect that and work with it. You know, the moment there's a 4/4 body on the field, they have to do something to deal with it. In most constructed environments, if you're in like a standard or an explorer, they just will have answers to a 4/4 for 5. Like, so as a result, that kind of stat line and that kind of cost is just not, you're not getting enough in a 60 card constructed environment. However, in Commander, for 5 mana, people are playing like scarier things than this. And also this creature gets completely blanked by like a 1/1 Death Toucher. You know, there's not much you can do with it. So the fact that you can buff attackers and give them first strike, that's reasonable. So in cat decks, that's a very powerful effect, but it's also very expensive. You know, 4 mana for that. The fact that it's a 1/1 counter, it's not +1/+1 until end of turn, that's big. The counter is very, very real. If you're not putting that on a cat, it's probably not worth it. Like, this is the kind of thing where if you run out of gas, then sure, it's a nice little mana sink that can get you some value. Also note, you don't have to tap the Ingenious Leonin, so the Leonin itself could also be attacking. So as part of the attack, where you're taking advantage of that ability, you could have this 4/4 in the mix, like Tangolin, which is good. And then on top of that, if you have 8 mana lying around, or even 12, you could trigger it multiple times. That could be real. Like, that could give you the edge you need in combat to win. But like I said, I think it's a little too expensive for not a ton of value in constructed. Even in Commander, like in a lower power Commander pod where you're running like cat, you know, like cat themed, it could be fun. You could do some good stuff with that. But in a higher power deck, I don't really see it. Unless you're like running, I don't know, if you're running like Zerta as your commander, this could be fun because Zerta makes activated abilities cheaper. That could be neat. I don't know. But yeah, it seems it's a perfectly fine limited card. Like in limited, this will win you games. If you're just playing with the like Jumpstart against Jumpstart right out of the packs, this card is probably going to win you a game or two. Like, I wouldn't be surprised. All right, next up. Lita, Mechanical Engineer. This is a legendary artifact creature artificer. Okay. It's a 3/3 for 2 and a white. with Vigilance. At the beginning of your end step, untap each other artifact creature you control, and you can pay 3 and a white, tap, create a 5/5 colorless vehicle artifact token named Zeppelin with flying and crew 3. Note, the Zeppelin is not legendary. That's awesome. Notably, it also does not have haste. So the idea behind this card is you throw it down on turn 3. You have a 3/3 vigilant critter on the board. Cool. That's good. We like that. The next turn you can attack, assuming that your opponent is not likely to kill it in combat. And then you can tap, create the Zeppelin, and the turn after that, Lita could even crew the Zeppelin. Now, whenever you're playing vehicles, if you like play an additional creature that is capable of crewing the vehicle that it has summoning sickness, that's really where you want to be. That's how, you know, that way Lita could also attack on their own. But all in all, like, I actually think this card's pretty good. Like, I think it's really good. Being able to just like pay for tap and just create vehicles. If you're in a deck that can leverage vehicles to cool effect, that is really good. There are a number of cards out there that care about the number of vehicles you have or can crew vehicles cheaper. You know, there are effects that allow you to like crew vehicles temporarily until end of turn. There are even auras out there that just like auto crew vehicles. Like as long as they're attached to a vehicle, it just is a creature. Like there are a lot of ways that you can really take advantage of having vehicles down. And frankly, if you're running like any kind of vehicle deck in Commander, and most if not all of them have white in them, like all the commanders I can think of that really benefit from having vehicles online or really like reward you for having vehicles have white in them. Like this card's a shoo-in. It's so good. Like I think this is great in that style of deck. It's really cool, like token vehicles. And the other cool thing about it is if you trigger that once, also you can trigger it at instant speed, which is dope. So if you attack with Lita and your opponent tries to kill them with some kind of instant speed removal spell, in response you could pay 4, tap, and create the Zeppelin. So yeah, Lita's gone, but you have 1 Zeppelin and a 5/5 flyer. It's 5/5 flyers can win games. So yeah, I think this card's really good. I like it a lot. Definitely feels like a kind of a casual kind of card, but it's one of those where like the general power and efficiency is there. So like this is the kind of card that I look at and I think, oh, there are a lot of commander decks that are going to be really happy to have this. And then I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, it showed up on like a Pro Tour list. Granted, these cards are going to be legal in Commander, Legacy, and Vintage. That's it. They're not going to be legal in Standard. They're not going to be legal in Modern. So we're not going to see any of that. So the chances of us seeing this on any kind of Pro Tour list are very, very low. But it's good. That's all I'm saying. This card is very good. It's worth the Mythic tag, the Mythic slot on this one. All right, next up, Magnanimous Magistrate. And I thought Wizards had kind of jumped the shark on naming when they named Pugnacious Pugilist in Streets of New Capenna, but oh no, Magnanimous Magistrate. 3/4 for 5 and a white human advisor. Magnanimous Magistrate enters the battlefield with 5 reprieve counters on it. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, if its mana value was 1 or greater, you may remove that many reprieve counters from Magnanimous Magistrate. If you do, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. Huh. This is interesting. This is very interesting. So if you have a 2-drop or 3-drop that dies, whether you sacrificed it, whether an opponent killed it, you can just remove those counters and bring it back. I think that's actually pretty good. Is that effect worth 6 mana though? I don't know. And the fact that it comes on a creature as well is actually a huge downside. Huge downside. Because if you spend 6 mana on the Magistrate, your opponent, if they've read the card, understands that in order for any of your other creatures that have mana value 5 or less to like die and stay dead, they need to kill this first. And the Magistrate's only a 3/4, so they will. Like they'll be able to pretty effectively. Yeah, 3/4s for 6 do not survive on the board very long. So this card has a cool effect. I really like the design of it. Because, I mean, even if you had like a 5-drop that dies immediately after the magistrate hits the field, it just comes back. That's pretty cool. The other thing that I want to do with this card is do something with populate. Populate? Is that the word I'm thinking of? No, that's not the one. Proliferate. It's been a long week. I apologize for that. Proliferate. I want to proliferate with this so that I can get more and more reprieve counters on the magistrate. The other great thing to do here is blinking. So we were talking about this earlier. We have a blink card in the white deck as well. So if we have a couple of 2 and 3, you know, if we have a 2-drop and a 3-drop that die, magistrate brings them right back to the battlefield. We then use an effect to just blink the magistrate, bring them back. They come back in with 5 new counters on them, and you're restocked and ready to go. So I probably wouldn't run this card unless I am intentionally sacrificing my stuff for value, because you can't guarantee your things are dying. And if you can't guarantee your things are dying, you're not going to get value out of this ability. It's really that simple. So you need to have somewhat cheap creatures. They need to die regularly. Like, this isn't an auto-include in any kind of aggressive deck. And even then, the mana cost and the stat line make it purely like casual EDH territory. Like, this is just casual commander kind of setup. Like, I can't imagine running this in any other kind of decks, to be honest. All right, next up we have Preston the Vanquisher. This is a legendary rabbit wizard. They are a 2/5 for 3 and a white. Whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it wasn't cast, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's a 0/1 white illusion. Pay 1 and a white, sacrifice 5 illusions, exile target non-land permanent. This is interesting and kind of weird. I think the juice is not worth the squeeze here, if I'm honest. So a 2/5 for 4 is a bad rate. Wizard is a relevant creature type. Rabbit, I mean, this isn't our first rabbit, but at the same time, I don't think it's common enough to make any kind of like creature type synergies with it. So, yeah. If non-token creatures are entering the battlefield, they need to be getting there somehow. So you can blink them. That's a non-token creature entering that you didn't cast. You can reanimate them. Those are non-token creatures entering that you didn't cast. So, all right, neat. The fact that it doesn't count tokens is really a bummer. But getting a copy of that creature could be very beneficial. So if you're getting, you know, like if you're blinking cards like the Magistrate, if you're blinking cards, or actually the Magistrate bringing things back from the graveyard, that's them entering there without dying. So, all right, cool. Now we're talking. We got some synergy. So that's nice. The problem with it, though, it doesn't change the creature's name. And the reason that I said that is a problem is if you have a legendary creature, you will create the illusion token, except the instant the illusion token enters the battlefield, you'll have to choose to either sacrifice the original or the illusion. Now, you can do some interesting shenanigans with that if you so choose, if you have recurring death triggers and that kind of thing. But it's, you don't get them both forever, which is a little bit of a problem. And then being able to sacrifice 5 illusions to exile target non-land permanent is fine. If I were to build like a commander deck around Preston, I would definitely be doing reanimator shenanigans and a ton of blink. Like cards like Teleportation Circle, Conjurer's Closet. In Commander I wouldn't be able to do it, but I'd want to put like Yorion in there, that kind of thing. So you want to be doing a lot of blink stuff to really take advantage of this. Just rip a ton of illusions that hopefully have beneficial abilities. And then if you absolutely have to, you can cash 5 of them in to get rid of a pesky permanent. So I think in Commander you can do some fun stuff with this, but that's exactly where this belongs. I can't imagine building any kind of competitive 60 card deck with this. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. It's a cool design. I like it. All right, next up we have our first blue card, Alandra, Sky Dreamer. This is a 2/4 Merfolk Wizard for 2 blue. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a 2/2 blue Drake creature token with flying. Whenever you draw your 5th card each turn, Alandra, Sky Dreamer, and Drakes you control each get +X till end of turn, where X is the number of cards in your hand. I think this is good. Like, I think it's just simply good. And I would definitely want to put this in the same deck as like Tulrand, the other merfolk that produces Drake tokens. because you can do fun stuff with that, obviously. It's synergy. If you can create Drake tokens in multiple ways, in addition to having Alandra on the field, then all of a sudden you're creating a just big old army of Drakes. And then if you do manage to draw 5 cards in a turn, which sounds like a really tall ask, it sounds like a tall order. But in a world where wheels exist, in a world where cards like Silver Scrutiny and Sphinx's Revelation are running around where that's like X and then a cost and like draw X cards, like it's not hard to have X equal 5. It's really not. And then if X equals 5 in that kind of situation, you're drawing 5 cards in addition to whatever you already had there. Your entire team of flyers gets that plus X plus X. I mean, Alandra turns. So if you have Alandra on the field and you draw multiple cards per turn for a couple of turns. Now, it also triggers on your opponent's turn, note. So if you have a card like a Consecrated Sphinx that allows you to draw cards when your opponents draw the cards, then all of a sudden you can be drawing multiple cards on your opponent's turns, getting Drakes just for every single turn around getting a ton of Drakes for every turn cycle. And then you rip 1 Silver Scrutiny or 1 Sphinx's Revelation for where X equals 5. All of a sudden your hand has like 15 cards in it, and now all of your Drakes are like 17/17s. That's insane. Not to mention Alandra themselves also becomes huge. So this is the kind of card that is very easily abusable, and as a result, it's a must-kill threat when it hits the battlefield. So be aware of that, because cards like decks that reward you for drawing cards tend to fire very consistently and tend to be pretty good because drawing cards is very powerful. It just is. So I think this card's good. I think a lot of people are going to really enjoy playing this in Commander. Next up, Biblioplex Kraken. This is a 4/5 Kraken for 4 and a blue. When Biblioplex Kraken enters the battlefield, scry 3. Whenever Biblioplex Kraken attacks, you may return another creature you control to its owner's hand. If you do, it can't be blocked this turn. Being able to reload a creature with an ETB is actually pretty cool. I can appreciate that. That's also a way to get around like pacifism or arrest style removal. So if your opponent hits one of your things with like an arrest where it's like pinned down where they can't attack, block, or use abilities, Biblioplex Kraken bounce it back up to your hand. You can then recast it. You're good to go. It's also great for resetting like adventure creatures or creatures that have channel abilities, that kind of thing, or creatures that are like double face cards. You know, you can choose the other mode by bouncing it back up to your hand, and it gives you a lot of options. So that last effect, it may not sound like much, but it's actually pretty cool. And the fact that you then get in for 4 free damage because it can't be blocked, that's bonus. The Scry 3 up on ETB is also pretty good. Like Scry becomes so much better than like the deeper you go. Like Scry 1 is always nice, but it's fine. Scry 2 feels really good. Like Scry 2, definitely twice as good as Scry 3. I would say that Scry 3 is probably twice as good as Scry 2. Like, I know mathematically that doesn't make sense, but it feels that way. Being able to check the top 3 cards, like, without any kind of manipulation, those are the 3 next cards you are going to draw. And this gives you the ability to order them however you want, or just refuse them. If you don't believe that, if you see a card in that stack that you don't think is going to be worth drawing in the next 3 turns because of the board state, just put it to the bottom. Just get it out of here. That's huge. Like, scrying is a powerful ability that feels kind of like, it doesn't feel as good as it actually is, if that makes sense. It's really good. So Scry 3 is excellent. So it's a big, expensive blue creature, but I think it's actually not bad. Like, it's fine. I don't mind this card. This is definitely more casual Commander, but to be honest, that's where most Jumpstart cards are going to go. And I think Wizards knows that, which is why so many of them are legendary creatures. And that's okay. Like, that makes a lot of sense. The starter packs feeding into the casual format, it makes sense. And this is one of those that is going to be a role player in Commander that's going to be perfectly fine in more casual pods. In pods that are like really dialed in and people are running really powerful stuff, this is probably going to feel pretty bad. But I don't know. If you can take advantage of that last ability, this actually looks good. Also, I had no idea. The Biblioplex, by the way, is the library on Strixhaven's it's like the central library that all the different colleges attend on the Strixhaven campus. And I gotta say, the fact that like Krakens like this are just just trolling around in the stacks,
Like, that's terrifying. Just putting that out there. Like, could you imagine just, like, studying for finals and then you, like, turn a corner and you're facing this? I've had some weird run-ins in libraries, but nothing quite like that. Anyway, next up, Hold for Questioning. This is an aura for 3 and a blue. Enchant creature or planeswalker. When Hold for Questioning enters the battlefield, tap enchant a permanent and investigate, which means you create a clue token. Enchant a permanent doesn't untap during its control's untap step, and its activated abilities can't be activated. I like the fact that this pins down their activated abilities. It could also attach to planeswalkers. So we see this kind of effect in almost every set. Blue gets some kind of aura that can tap something down and it stays tapped. It's fine. Like, it's limited removal. It's the kind of removal that you generally don't want to run in Constructed because you leave them with a body they can work with. Now, in a lot of cases, they can still activate the abilities. In this case, they can't. So that's very helpful. And the fact that it can hit Planeswalkers is a big deal. But these kind of effects, they leave the body back so they can be sacrificed, they can be blinked, and this would fall off. There's a lot of ways to interact with this. And if your opponent has something that can destroy an enchantment, it just gets blown out too. These are too easy to get around. They're way too easy to get around. So this type of effect is one that I tend to avoid. I don't like it. And this one costing 4 is a little expensive. In limited, it can be fine. Like, if your opponent does actually, if you're playing Jumpstart and your opponent has a Planeswalker, this is probably a very clean answer to it. So that's nice. But at the same time, in limited environments, you don't usually run into Planeswalkers. So it'll be very interesting to see how common Planeswalkers are throughout the packs. Because on a creature, I don't really love this. Investigating's nice. You kind of get the card back, but you still have to pay 2 for that card. I don't know. I don't love it. I don't know. I just don't love these effects. Next up, Isu the Abominable. Now, I have talked about this card on the channel before, so I'm going to be pretty brief about it. 5/5 for 3 blue, legendary snow creature Yeti. You can look at the top card of your library at any time. You can play snow lands and cast snow spells from the top of your library. Whenever another snow permanent enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay green, white, or blue. If you do, put a +1 counter on Isu. I think if you want to run a snow deck, Bant is not the color to do it, which is really, I think, kind of unfortunate because there's a ton of awesome, like, black snow stuff from Kaldheim that isn't an option if you're running Isu. But all the same, like, blue has some phenomenal snow stuff. White and green both have some good snow stuff, too. So it's a fun idea. If you want to run snow, Isu is, like, one of the best commanders because it's just card advantage stable to a commander. It does the thing. So, good card, all in all. Yeah, if you're interested in a snow deck, check this guy out. Next up, Kenessos, Priest of Thassa, is a 1/3 for 1 and a blue Merfolk Cleric. If you would scry a number of cards, scry that many cards +1 instead. Let's just talk about how much I love that. Oh, let's go. And then pay 3 hybrid blue-green. Look at the top card of your library. If it's a Kraken, Leviathan, Octopus, or Serpent creature card, you may put it onto the battlefield. If you don't put the card onto the battlefield, you may put it onto the bottom of your library. I have a number of Leviathan and Octopus cards in my collection. And one of the things about, like, the Octopus, Leviathan, Kraken archetype, because it's absolutely an archetype out there. If you want to build that deck, you definitely want to be in green and blue, because most of the creatures are blue, and they're super expensive. And so green gives you access to ramp to actually, like, get the mana that you need to cast the huge dumb blue things. Now, that's great, but this Kenessos is like, this is like the best commander for that deck. It's a cheap commander that you can play very fast, and on top of that, you can just pay 4 and put one of these like 7 or 8 drop creatures directly onto the battlefield. Now, in order to really take advantage of this, you need to be able to manipulate the top of your deck in some way. Because if you don't, you're just spinning the wheel for 4, which, to be honest, could be fun, and like you can get some interesting like Hail Mary shots that might actually work. But if you like cast a Brainstorm or activate a Sensei's Divining Top before Kenessos Priest of Thassa's activation, and you can manipulate the top of your deck and make sure that there's like a 9-drop Leviathan on top, then activate 4 and just get it onto the field? Get out of here. That's nuts. Like, that's actively nuts. And on top of that, like, if you're manipulating the top of your library through scrying, Kenessos makes it better. You scry deeper to make it even easier to manipulate. This is insane. Like, this card is super powerful. If you have ever wanted to build, like, a Leviathan or Kraken deck, this is your commander. It's that simple. I mean, Runo Stromkirk, I'm sorry. Like, we love you. We love what you were trying. We love that we could play with Garuda, but Kenessos is just, that's bonkers. Absolutely bonkers. This card's nuts. All right, next up. Launch Mishap. This is an instant for 2 and a blue. Counter target creature or planeswalker spell. Create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. I don't love counter spells that can like. I don't love playing limited counter spells, and by that I mean like cards like Essence Scatter or Remove Soul if you're old school. That's a like counter target creature spell. I don't love those because creature spells could also like creatures can also be removed with like a whole category of spells in removal spells like destroy target creature, exile target creature, that kind of effect. So the idea of spending counter spells on creatures always felt like a waste to me. However, creatures also have crazy enter the battlefield triggers these days. Like they just do. That's very common. So being able to counter it on the stack so that you don't get any ETB triggers is very valuable. And then on top of that, you get a Thopter for your troubles. I don't hate this. The fact that it can also hit planeswalkers is very, very meaningful. In Commander, I probably wouldn't run this because it costs 3. That's kind of, at the end of the day, it costs 3. That said, it can hit, it could hit almost every card that could be a Commander. I say almost because there's one vehicle that I'm aware of that could be a Commander. But other than that, I think every card that is an eligible commander is either a legendary creature or a planeswalker. So this does hit all of those for 3. And then you get the Thopter. So if you want to like kind of troll your friends, this might be a fun way to do it in commander games. But the fact that it's splashable is also really meaningful. The fact that it only costs 1 blue and the other 2 is generic, that's cool, actually. That's really good. And in control decks, like leaving a token behind is a big deal. So that 1/1 Thopter is worth a lot in a deck that maybe doesn't have a lot of creatures. So this is actually the kind of thing that I could see running if I'm in a meta. So even if I'm in a 60 card format and I'm in a meta that's very heavy with like planeswalkers and creatures, which a lot of the current metas are. If I'm running like a Transmogrify kind of situation, I could totally see myself running this because you counter their 3-drop on your or 2-drop on your turn 3, and then you go to your turn, you Transmogrify the Thopter into Agent of Treachery or whatever nonsense you want to be doing. So there's a case for this card actually being pretty solid. It's a counterspell. I tend not to run counterspells in Commander, to be honest, just because they seem kind of rude. And if I am gonna run them in Commander, you have better options. Even old school counterspell, just blue counter target spell, is like the best. Well, it's not the best. There are many better, but all the same. I don't know. It's fine. Like this is a fine bread and butter 3-drop counterspell. All right. Next up, Merfolk Pupil. This is a 1/1 Merfolk Wizard for 1 and a blue. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card, then discard a card. You may pay 1. So then 1 and a blue, exile Merfolk Pupil from your graveyard, draw a card, then discard a card. Oh, so it's like quasi Merfolk Looter, but you get it on ETB, and then you can also loot out of your graveyard with it. If I'm in a situation where I'm trying to fill my graveyard, this actually is a pretty cool tool. So if I like mill myself and I mill a copy of Merfolk Pupil, but I have like a reanimation target or something like that in my hand that I really want to be in my graveyard, being able to activate the Pupil and, draw a card, then discard the card that I wanted in my graveyard anyway, that's actually really cool. So I think this is a neat design. The ETB, draw and discard is fine, but the being able to exile from the graveyard, that's the part that really gets me excited. I think this is decent, actually. I think it's decent. It's also a wizard, which is relevant. There are a lot of wizard synergies throughout Magic's history. So cards that can buff wizard abilities, buff wizard stats, give wizards keywords and stuff. That's all out there. So in a dedicated wizard deck that is somehow leveraging the graveyard, this is actually pretty good. It's a neat little utility creature. I like it. I like the design on this quite a bit, actually. Next up, Pirated Copy. I see what you did there, Wizards. This is a 0/0 shapeshifter pirate for 4 and a blue. You may have Pirated Copy enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it's a pirate in addition to its other types. And it has, whenever this creature or another creature with the same name deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card. This is actually really good. I like it. I think a 5-mana clone is pretty expensive. That's not generally where you want to be, but I think the added benefit is very real. So if you can copy a flyer, then all of a sudden you now have 2 copies of whatever flyer you're working with, and when they connect, if they both connect to the opponent, which they're more likely to do because they're flying, you draw 2 cards. Like, that's actually really good. Note, this grants the other creature this ability the turn Pirated Copy enters the battlefield. So the copy is, for all intents and purposes, the exact same creature, and it shares a name with that creature, which is important. So that other creature has the same name, and then when that creature hits, even the turn this comes into play, you can still draw a card off it. So that's actually pretty great. So if you're in an aggressive deck, that's relevant. And on top of that, if you're running a deck with a lot of pirates, like if you're trying to run, pirates in Commander or something like that, this is kind of a shoe-in. Like, go ahead and put it in the deck because you can do some really cool things with it. Also of note, tokens all have the same name. So, and their name is usually whatever type of creature they are. So if you have like a soldier token, like a 1/1 soldier token, their type is soldier and their name is soldier. So if you have a huge army of soldier tokens or citizen tokens or rat tokens or whatever, I don't know if there are any like pirate tokens. I'd imagine there are. In any event, you have Pirated Copy come in as a copy of one of those tokens. You then swing with your entire team. You draw a card for every single one that connects because they all share the same name. That's fun. So this card has some cool implications and can really be used to pretty good effect. So I like it. I think it's cool. All right. Next up, Soul Read. This is an instant for 3 and a blue. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 4 or draw 2 cards. So this is a bad counter spell and a bad divination combined. Now I say bad divination because it costs 4. And if you're not familiar, divination is 3 and a blue, draw 2 cards. But it's a sorcery. The fact that this is instant actually redeems it quite a bit. We have seen situations where 4 mana, draw 2 cards is great. But usually it comes with some kind of selection. We have Behold the Multiverse from Call Time, or we have Memory Deluge from Midnight Hunt. 2 cards that are 4 mana, some of which is blue. In the case of Behold the Multiverse, you can foretell it. That's a whole thing. But on its face, it's a 4 mana instant. And so 4 mana instant, get 2 cards is actually pretty good because you do go up in that exchange. You spend 1 card, you get 2. You have to spend 4 mana on it, but I would say 4 mana is worth a card in a lot of situations, and especially because it can be instant. Divination being sorcery speed feels very, very bad because you just draw 2 cards, you don't impact the board, and all your mana is tapped. At instant speed, however, you go through the entire turn that your opponent gets to take an entire turn. If they cast any cards that you need to deal with, you can counter them or remove them, bounce them, do whatever you need to do. But if they don't, they get to the end step, you draw 2 cards. Now, in the case of Soul Read, it's also the counterspell that you need. So this is, I look at it, and it's like, this card doesn't feel great, but at the same time, I think it probably is, actually. As an instant, this is really strong. And also the fact that it can target any kind of spell. This isn't counter-target non-creature spell, unless its controller pays 4. Also, paying 4 is a lot. So especially in the early and mid game, that might as well just read counter target spell. There are going to be so many times where your opponent does not have 4 mana lying around. Now, if they're in a super ramp deck, you basically can't touch them with this because they're going to be. But even then, it's not a dead card in your hand because you can always just cash it in for 2 more cards. So actually, I think this card is really good. This is actually a pretty good utility piece that any kind of blue deck that's heavy on interaction that wants to be running at instant speed, you probably don't want to run one of these. I can actually see this making a lot of waves in Commander. Maybe not a ton of waves, but I can see it slotting into a lot of lists as as just a good utility piece. Yeah, I think it's actually really strong. Next up, Synchronized Eviction. This is an instant for 4 and a blue. The spell costs 2 less to cast if you control at least 2 creatures that share a creature type. Put target non-land permanent into its owner's library, second from the top. So for 5 mana, the ability to tuck something, second from the top, is fine. You're delaying it coming back, so you're removing it kind of. If it's a token, you're removing it forever. If it's not, if you're putting a card back, you could be giving the oppo an opportunity to, reload and enter the battlefield trigger, or even a cast trigger, which could be pretty scary. I would definitely run this if you're running mill. If you can like throw it back into the opponent's library and then have him mill it, like that's pretty powerful. That's a nice way to get rid of a pesky permanent forever. Well, not necessarily forever, because the graveyard is a place where you can fish stuff out of, but all the same, I think it's actually not bad. And if you're in a deck, like if you're in like Merfolk, for example, or Pirates, we were just talking about Pirates. Like if you have a Pirate deck, being able to get this effect for 3, that's pretty good. Like that's actually really good. Like pay 3, effectively remove something for the time being. And on top of that, though, the other thing that you're doing when you tuck a card into an opponent's deck, or even if you put it right on top, what you're doing is you're denying them momentum through their deck. Because yes, second from the top, they will draw it in 2 turns. Like they will. Like if you don't interact with it beyond that point, or if it doesn't shuffle, like if they like crack a fetch land or something, then all bets are off. But what you're doing is you're denying them mobility through their deck. And so if there are answers, if there are threats that they're trying to get to that maybe are better than the thing you just removed, they're not going to find them because they're going to find that thing, whatever it was. So they better really want that thing because they're about to draw it. It's going to be one of their draws. And when you're drawing cards that you already have seen and already know isn't necessarily as exciting as the ones that, are deeper in and can do more for you. So that's meaningful. Denying draws is a big deal. Anybody who's played Memory Lapse knows being able to deny your opponent's draw can be shockingly powerful. And this does that in addition to getting a pesky permanent off the field. So I think it's pretty strong, especially if you can take advantage of the cost reduction. Yeah, I like it. Next up, our first black card, Ashcoat of the Shadow Swarm. Man, that is a metal name. We have a 3/4 rat warlock for 3 and a black. Whenever Ashcoat of the Shadow Swarm attacks or blocks, other rats you control get +X until end of turn, where X is the number of rats you control. At the beginning of your end step, you may mill 4 cards. If you do, return up to 2 rat creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. This is tough to read because rat decks historically, and I actually did have a rat deck back in the day. I had a number. This is predating Commander even. Back in my kitchen table jank days, I did have like 3 Marrow Gnawer, and I used them a lot. I loved that card. It was the Rat Lord back in the day, and there are a number of rats out there that are like 1 or 2 drops that have some relevant ability, and there's some even that grow depending on the number of rats you have, and they're fine. But like none of them are great is the thing. And like over the years, some rats have been better than others, and like they're fine. But at the end of the day, like there are very few rats out there that really like shine and are really incredible, And that's a problem, really. Like if you're trying to build around a creature type, it needs to be supported. You need to have good creatures of that type. And I think as far as a rat commander goes, this is as good as it gets, straight up. Because what you want to be doing if you're playing rats, you want to be committing rats to the board, and you want them to be growing based on the number of rats you have. There are a ton of rats that do that throughout time, or throughout Magic's history. And so this does it to the nth degree. When you attack, if Ashcoat attacks, all your rats become huge, like immediately. It's overrun on a commander. That's awesome. So it's great. And on top of that, you're getting the mill action, so that's a way to fill your hand with more rats. But like if you're not running like Relentless Rats or Ravenous Rats or Rat Colony, the ones where you can have like any number in your deck, like that's the only way I can see Ashcoat really shining. is the rats like that, where you can have a ton of them and they can carry the game on their own, but then if Ashcoat hits, it is going to be the nail in the coffin for your opponents. But yeah, because the other rats just aren't good, in my opinion, like, which is a shame, because I like them, but yeah, it just doesn't get there. So as a result, like, I feel like this is the best commander for a creature type that's just not good, is really the bottom line, which is a shame, but it's a strong card. You get card advantage, you get an overrun style effect. The other thing is, though, your opponents are going to see this coming. And Ashcoat needs to attack, and it does not have haste. So be aware of that. So it's going to hit the battlefield, and if you have any more rats on the field, your opponent is going to wipe the board, or they're going to pick off Ashcoat before you can declare it as an attacker. That is going to happen almost every time. Unless your opponents just aren't running interaction, in which case you're going to overrun them very fast. Yeah, you're going to Zerg rush them pretty hard with this if they don't have an answer. So there's something to that. Next up, Conductor of Cacophony. This is 2/1 for 3 and a black. It's a demon. It enters the battlefield with 2+1/+1 counters on it. Interesting. So it's effectively a 4/3. Pay 1 black, remove a +1/+1 counter from Conductor of Cacophony. It deals 1 damage to each other creature and each player. This effect is near and dear to my heart. I adore this effect. So it hits each other creature, so it doesn't touch itself, which is nice. It only has 2 counters, so I want to do some way. I want to take advantage. I would like some way to reload this. But there's a card from back in the day that I believe was printed in alpha. If it wasn't, it wasn't. It didn't. It came around shortly after, called Pestilence, which was an enchantment where you can pay one. You could pay 1 black mana and deal 1 damage to all creatures and all players. So, but the catch with Pestilence was at the end of your turn, if there were no creatures on the battlefield, is it end your turn or is it at any time? If there were no creatures on the battlefield, you had to sacrifice it. So if it killed absolutely everything, you lost it, was the idea. I used to run that in a Norzov deck alongside creatures that had protection from black, so they didn't take damage from it. It got fun. Yeah, it was very fun. You could do a lot of crazy things with that. So it's one of those things. It was baby's first stacks deck. I really enjoyed it. And Conductor of Cacophony, it does the same thing, you know. But unfortunately, at most, without any kind of assistance, you're only getting 2 damage off it. I don't like that. So I would definitely want to put this in a deck that can reload counters onto it, either with like Heliod and Life Gain. Like, this is kind of a fixed walking ballista kind of situation. In that scenario, maybe not so much, but I don't know. There are uses for this. That effect is pretty cool. It's a fun callback to like a classic card. I don't know how exactly it works with cacophonies, but that's fine, whatever. Yeah, the fact that the demon gets smaller when you use it is something that you need to be aware of and need to work around. Also, I want to point out, removing the counter is a cost of activation. If I'm not mistaken, if the Conductor of Cacophony has damage marked on it already, like if it's a 4/3 and you have 2 damage marked on it, you can activate this once. Because what will happen is you remove the +1/+1 counter as a cost to put that ability on the stack. The game state checks before you get priority again whether or not Conductor of Cacophony survives. And in that case, it would say, oh, it has 2 damage marked on it. The creature's now a 3/2 because the counter went away. So as a result, the Conductor of Cacophony is now dead before you get an opportunity to activate it a second time. So it and one of the +1/+1 counters would be going to the graveyard in that case. So be aware of that. If you're using the Conductor of Cacophony in combat, things might get a little weird. Because if you block and have some damage marked against the Conductor, you need to be very careful about that if you want to activate it before the end of your turn. So that's something to be aware of. It's going to get weird. It's part of the deal. And with it being able to deal 4 damage potentially, 4 damage potentially, there's a viable use case for that. Where you block with it, if it survives somehow, and then pump a bunch into it. I don't know. Like, you could do some cool things with it potentially, but if damage is marked against it, that's going to make the math weird. So just be aware of that. But I don't know. It's a neat idea. It's a callback to one of my favorite cards from back in the day. So I'm always on board. Yeah. So thank you, Conductor of Cacophony, for being you. Appreciate it. Next up, Creeping Bloodsucker. I'm actually shocked that name was available. That sounds like such a just straight over the middle vampire name. I'm surprised they haven't used it before. Anyway, vampire 1/2 for 1 and a black. At the beginning of your upkeep, Creeping Bloodsucker deals 1 damage to each opponent. You gain life equal to the damage dealt this way. That's really cool. Like, in a lot of vampire decks, there are a lot of life gain synergies. So if you, well, maybe in some decks, like, you could run like an Orzhov vampire deck that has like a life gain sub theme and do some really good stuff with this, because in a lot of situations in a commander game, if you're in a 4-player pod of commander, you deal 1 damage to each of your opponents, you gain 3 life at the beginning of your turn. That's a really meaningful swing right out the gate, and this is on a 2-drop common. Nice. Like, that's just good, right? Like, yeah, I think this is just really solid. If you have ways to benefit from the life gain, it's something. But even if you don't, it's putting your opponents on a clock that it's a long one, to be sure. And it's not super threatening. Like, one thing that you need to be aware of when you're playing Commander is the threat level. If you're throwing down huge Haymaker Mythics in the first couple of turns, your opponents are probably going to key in on you as the target and identify you as the primary threat on board, who's most likely to take away the game if left unchecked. Creeping Bloodsucker is not going to pull focus. So as a result, and your opponents are probably not going to want to run burn removal on this thing. They're just going to wait until it gets swept up in a board wipe. And so it's probably going to sit around for 4 or 5 turns. Well, if it sits around for 5 turns on a 4-person pod, this thing gained you 15 life for 2 mana. That's pretty sweet, right? So, and on top of that, if you have vampire synergies that could buff this thing, make it relevant in combat, all of a sudden, like, in vampire decks, this thing's actually really good. It's just a really solid bread and butter 2-drop. I really like this card. Yeah, I really like this card. All right, next up, Deadly Plot. This is an instant for 3 and a black. Choose one. Destroy target creature or planeswalker. Already worth the price of admission. Or return target zombie card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped at instant speed. You give me an instant speed reanimator, I am in. It's like, it costs 10. I don't care, I'm in. In this case, we have an instant speed reanimator for 4. Sick. But it can only return a zombie, and it returns it to the battlefield tapped. Well, that's okay. So you can't cheat in a blocker with this, which is a little unfortunate. That's kind of a bummer, but that's okay. But you can grab, there are a lot of really big, really good zombies out there. So if you're reanimating a Grave Titan at the end of your opponent's turn and then untapping with it right away and starting, like, that's just as good as it having haste. Like, that's incredible. And Grave Titan's like one of the best case scenarios, to be fair, but there are a lot of good zombies out there. So this is one of those cards, and it's just got flexibility, baby. It's flexibility for days. Being able to destroy any creature or planeswalker for 4. I mean, 4 is a lot to spend for that effect, but as we've all seen in Commander, being able to just point and click and remove that one thing that's going to wreck everybody if it goes unchecked is huge. Absolutely huge. I cannot tell you how many cards I have in my various Commander decks that are designed to just do that thing. You know, like, I have plenty of games where having Utter End, you know, or Terra Sunder in the deck, just because they can destroy or exile a non-land permanent. Like, I don't know what it is, but I just need to get rid of it. In this case, you're limited to creatures or planeswalkers, but still, like, being able to remove that pesky commander that your opponents are just going to take over the game with, that's huge, man. Or if a planeswalker's about to ult, just being able to point and click, get it off the board, makes a huge difference. And then being able to pull zombies back, if you're in any kind of zombie, like, every commander deck that runs zombies wants a copy of this. Just straight up all of them. Because it's flexibility. It's a single card in your 99 that is both point and click removal and get back your best thing that found its way to the graveyard. I mean, those are both effects you want, and you get them both on one card. Killer. Absolutely killer. This thing rocks. Next up, Disciple of Perdition. This is a 1/3 human warlock for 1 and a black. When Disciple of Perdition dies, choose one. If you have exactly 13 life, you may choose both. You draw a card and you lose 1 life. Exile target opponent's graveyard. That player loses 1 life. This card is interesting. The exactly 13 life clause is so fringe. I think it's probably never going to happen. I know the Tree of Perdition can like get your life total to 13 very easily. So like, okay, if you really want to be doing that, but I don't think it's worth getting both these effects because they're doing both very different things. Like drawing a card and losing 1 life is just fine. Now that said, losing 1 life at 13 in Commander is a problem. In Limited, 13 is not that far from your starting life total. So, all right, cool. If I'm in Commander and my life total is 13, I'm thinking very seriously how much I want that card. Because losing 1 life at that point is meaningful because you're at less than half your starting life total. So that's the point in the video game where like the HUD starts kind of like flashing to like that dull red. Like it's not like full on critical mode yet, but like you better be thinking about it because you're getting there, buddy. But then also being able to just exile target opponent's graveyard and that player loses 1. Exiling an opponent's graveyard is a big deal. It is. It's absolutely a big deal. So I think that could be very strong because it's not uncommon for there to be one person at the table who's leveraging their graveyard, especially in pods where I am because I love abusing my graveyards. It's one of my favorite things. So that's one of the, being able to pop that is very meaningful. Now, this is all coming on a body and it is a death trigger. So if your deck does not give you an ability to instant speed sacrifice this thing to take advantage of that, it's probably not that useful, to be honest. And instead, it's just going to draw you cards. Draw you a card when it dies, which, to be honest, is fine. I mean, the Novice Occultist is a card that I consider running in some sack decks right now, and this is a strictly better version of that. Novice Occultist is a 1/2 for 2. When it dies, you draw a card and lose a life. That's it. And in this case, if you're at like 4 or 5 life, if the HUD is really like flashing, letting you know, hey, you're about to die, dude, you need to, like, something needs to change. You don't have to choose to draw the card and lose a life. You can target an opponent's graveyard, even if their graveyard's not relevant. Just like, you take the damage so I don't. You take the life loss so I don't have to deal with it. That's an option with this, which not where Novice Cultist, you don't have that. It just hits you. So I don't know. It's not a bad card. In a sack deck situation where you can take advantage of that exile ability, that feels pretty good. And the fail case is you draw a card. Cool. I think that static of like the exact 13 life, that's barely ever gonna happen. That might as well not even be on the card in my opinion. But you never know. Maybe it will. Also, I see what they did there. It's a 1/3. It's 13. That's yeah. Anyway, next up, Ossuary Rats. That sounds like some kind of like really weird slur. It's a 3/2 rat for 5 and a black at common. When it enters the battlefield, it deals X damage to target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. I want to like this. The effect is good. Being able to put removal on an ETB is very, very good generally. But in this case, it's conditional removal. It's dealing damage. So if the opponent has a way to prevent damage or like if, things that are indestructible don't care about this, or they have protection, like that kind of thing. So there's that. And then on top of that, it's damage equal to X, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. So you have to fill your graveyard first before this is any good. But once you've filled your graveyard, this could nuke something potentially just upon ETB. And then if you were to blink it, bounce it, that kind of thing, you could reload it and do it again. So the effect is powerful. It's reasonable. I think it could be pretty good. But it's attached to a creature that costs 6, and the body is only a 3/2. So as a direct result, I think this is really, really, really bad. If it was like a 4/4 for 6 with this ability, or even a 4/3, frankly, it would be so much better. But a 3/2, by the time you can cast 6 drops, is barely going to have any effect on the board. And the fact that in a lot of games, I mean, if you aren't filling your graveyard with some kind of mill effect already, and or if you don't have, or if a bunch of your creatures haven't already died, then you throw this down and it's dealing 2, maybe 3 damage. Like, yeah, that might pick off something that's kind of annoying, but it's not going to be getting. I mean, you're playing a 6-drop, and you're getting a 3/2 body for the upside of being able to knock off what their 3-drop. Like, I don't like it. It's just a little too much. You have to jump through too many hoops. So I have no doubt there are situations where you could build a deck to abuse this, but I don't think the effect is strong enough to merit the effort of building the deck that can take advantage of this. So yeah, I don't love it. I just don't love this, which is unfortunate because it's a rat. It's a rat with a powerful with a removal ETB. I should love this, and I'm just gonna pick up more copies of Ravenous Chupacabra and pretend this doesn't exist. I mean, that is what it is. Anyway, next up, Rodolf Duskbringer. They already have a. What was it? I mean, there's already a card named Malcolm. There was also who was it that we saw earlier. They really wanted this not to be Rudolph. They really didn't want this name to be Rudolph. But come on, just name the guy Rudolph. But he's a vampire. But he's a vampire angel. The dichotomy. I like it. Anyway, so Rodolf Duskbringer, with his nose so bright, is a 4/4 vampire angel for 5 and a black with flying, death touch, and lifelink. Whenever you gain life, Rodolf the Red-Nosed Duskbringer gains indestructible until end of turn. At the beginning of your end step, you may pay 1 and hybrid Orzhov, white or black. When you do, return target creature with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the amount of life you gain this turn. Holy crap, this thing's insane. So if you're running, so we were talking about the Bloodsucker earlier that just gains you 3 life at the beginning of your turn. Rodolf Duskbringer right there. You put those two together. That means on your turn, Rodolf Duskbringer is just indestructible on your turn. You can also attack, you get lifelink, and then on your end step, you can pay 2, and because you have the lifelink on Rodolf, so you're gaining 4 life in addition to the 3 life you gained earlier. And now you can grab a 7-drop out of your graveyard and just slap it straight onto the battlefield? That's absurd. So this card is great, and of all the cards that we've seen so far today, I want to build this the most as far as commander is concerned. This is the one that strikes me as the most intriguing, because it's a vampire angel, and its color identity in commander is both black and white because of that triggered ability cost. So you could build angel tribal around this guy. You could build vampire tribal around this guy. You could build life gain around this. It does everything. And on top of that, you have Death Touch too. It is potentially an indestructible Death Toucher. And if you have cards that can gain life at instant speed, or creatures that can be like tapped at instant speed to gain life, or whatever the case may be, if you can get instant speed life gain off this, or if you can somehow give Rodolf First Strike so that the lifelink is triggered on First Strike damage, Rodolf is an indestructible Death Toucher with flying. What? It's 6 mana is a lot for a 4/4, but you get a ton to go along with it. This card's a house. I love it. Yeah, no, I think this card's incredible. Yeah, of all the cards that we've seen in Jumpstart, this is the one that I'm probably gonna build. So far. Yeah, I like it a lot. A lot. Just whoa. Holy whoa. Anyway, next up. Skull Slither Worm. This is a 3/3 worm for 3 and a black. When Skull Slither Worm enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card. For each opponent who can't put 2+1/+1 counters on Skull Slither Worm. That's kind of fun. So it's a 3/3 for 4. It ETBs and everybody discards a card, except you. So, all right, cool. It only hits opponents. And forcing your opponent to discard a card is meaningful, especially around turn 4. Because unless they're running a lot of draw card effects, which is pretty common in Commander to be fair, but if they're not, again, I'm assuming Commander for all of these, because I feel like that's really just the format that all these cards are going to end up in. So if your opponents are running like a really low to the ground deck and they've run out of cards, all of a sudden, like if one of your opponents is going super low to the ground, you've gotten a 5/5 for 4 that forced 2 other people to discard a card. That's pretty great. You spent 1 card, and you either get a really big body that the opponents need to work with, or they, you monkey with their hand a little bit. And turn 4 is kind of the sweet spot to be doing that, because that's a lot of the time, that's when people are down to 3 or fewer cards. Again, if they're not running dedicated card draw style effects that are relatively cheap. So I like this. I like this a lot, actually. I think this card is really good. Yeah. It's just solid. And again, it's also an ETB. So it's an ETB that doesn't care if you've cast it. So if you can blink this, if you can put this in the same deck as a Conjurer's Closet or a Teleportation Circle, you can just blink it every turn and force your opponent to just discard every turn. So the one player who's running Rhystic Study or Consecrated Sphinx is going to have a handful and they're not going to care, but everybody else is going to be really upset by this. Yeah, which is really good. And if it's late in the game and everybody's run out of gas, you just get a really big body that can start crashing in and really busting up people's boards, which is nice. That's exactly where you want to be. So that card's actually pretty solid. Like, it's not bad. Does the thing. All right, next up, Suspicious Shambler. This is a 4/2 zombie for 3 and a black. You may pay 4 black, exile Suspicious Shambler from your graveyard, create 2 black zombie creature tokens. Activate only as a sorcery. So I really like cards like this that have the abilities out of the graveyard because it gives you late game options. I especially like them in limited environments. So this is going to be a card that, again, in Jumpstart, like if you're doing like the Jumpstart 2-pack shuffle thing, I could totally see this winning you some games. 4 power on board is real. For 4 mana, that's worth it. You're doing all right. And that ability, so it gives you a little bit of reach in the later game to be able to rock 6 and just get 2 tokens down. They also come in untapped and they can block. So you do have to do it on your turn, but you get 2 bodies for it. So card seems decent. Like, and if you're running, a dedicated zombie deck, it's fine. Like, it's a common, like, budget option, even in Commander. Like, a lower-powered Commander pod. This is fine. I'm not mad at this. Next up, Termination Facilitator. Yikes. This is that HR rep you don't want to have calling you down to their office. 1/3 human assassin for 1 and a black. Tap, put a bounty counter on target creature or planeswalker. Activate only as a sorcery. Whenever a creature or planeswalker an opponent controls with a bounty counter on it is dealt damage, destroy it. I like this. This is fun. So your opponent has a 10/10 like Rust Goliath out. Tap. Termination Facilitator is now live and online. That thing, all damage going towards that creature as long as Termination Facilitator is on the battlefield. All of that damage, all damage touching that creature, it has Death Touch effectively. That's really cool. It's kind of like this reverse Death Touch situation. I like it a lot. Also, it's a bounty counter. There are other cards out there that care about bounty counters. Be aware of those. Check them out. There's an assassin, or there's a hunter from Ikoria that has a bounty counter situation where if a creature has a bounty counter on it, you can like gain cards when it dies. So like, cool. Dude's name is escaping me right now, but he's got a killer mustache if I remember correctly. In any event, being able to synergize with bounty counters is kind of fun. And yeah, this card's actually just really good. Like, again, it does the thing. And this is the kind of thing that I want to see assassins doing. Like, it's capable of removing creatures. That said, is Termination Facilitator better than Inferno Grasp, which is 1 and a black, destroy target creature, you lose 2 life? Or Go for the Throat, destroy target non-artifact creature? Probably not, because in reality, you're probably going to be using the Facilitator once, and then it's probably going to get removed. Like, this is probably not likely to stick around. And on top of that, if the Facilitator's gone, the bounty counter sticks around. But unless the Facilitator comes back in some way, if it's not like, if you reanimate it or whatever, then okay, then great, it's still here. But if this body's gone, that static is gone. Which means the bounty counter on the other creature is irrelevant. It doesn't change the damage anymore. So it's interesting. It's a cool idea. It's a cool card. I like the design. It changes the dynamics in combat nicely. Like if you put this on a really big creature that your opponent has, all of a sudden they don't want to block with it. Well, that's good. And they're probably not likely to attack into a chump block situation. Because all of a sudden they can swing at you with a 10/10, you can block with a 1/1, and their 10/10 dies. That feels really bad. So obviously they're gonna want to avoid that. So it's a cool card. It's a cool design. It can change some dynamics in Commander in some neat ways. If you have ways to untap this, where you could like tap it multiple times in a turn to just load up bounty counters on a ton of stuff around the board, that could be fun. And then possibly pop the Cacophony where you deal 1 damage to everything. That's neat. Like, you could do some fun stuff with that where you can kill a lot of stuff in one go. That's neat. I could see building around that. That could be fun. That could be a lot of fun. Is it going to be good? Maybe not. But in a casual Commander pod, it changes dynamics, and I like that. I like in my Commander cards, I'm looking for cards that can change the dynamic on the table without just being like overtly strong, and that's what this does, and I like that. Next up, Ardoz, Cobbler of War. This is another one that I've already touched on the channel, so I'm going to cover it very briefly. And again, and now we're into red, which is always fun. Ardoz, Cobbler of War. This is a 1/1 haste goblin shaman for 1 and a red. Whenever Ardoz, Cobbler of War, or another creature enters the battlefield under control, that creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn. And you can pay 4, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token with haste, activate only as a sorcery. It's interesting that the creatures entering don't natively have haste, which is interesting. So the creatures enter as all your creatures enter as 3/2s or 3/1s, or Ardoz enters as a 3/1. In your goblin shamans or your goblin creature tokens enter as 3/1s, which is neat. But other creatures you control get this power boost when they enter. But if they don't natively have haste, they just have a power boost, and it doesn't really accomplish anything. So you definitely want to combine Ardoz with effects that grant haste, such as Swiftfoot Boots and Lightning Greaves, and it makes sense that Ardoz is a cobbler, so I think that's kind of fun. Like, give the hasty shoes, get hasty shoes, and that's what you're looking for here. So, cool commander, neat idea. It's a way to build like an aggressive goblin deck without just building Krenko for the 10,000th time, and I like that. It's kind of cool. Or Muxus, for that matter. Anyway, next up we have Auntie Blyte, Bad Influence. I love that title. We have a 2/2 Flying Devil Advisor for 2 and a red. Whenever a source you control deals damage to you, put that many +1/+1 counters on Auntie Blyte, Bad Influence. Then pay 1 and a red, tap, remove X 1/1 counters from Auntie Blyte. It deals X damage to any target. So we were talking about how much I loved Pestilence and that style of effect where it hits everything on the board. And red has a couple of like board sweepers that deal like 2 damage to all creatures and all players. Like that kind of thing absolutely exists in red and black. And so like Auntie Blyte is the kind of card that I want to put in the same kind of deck as like Brash Taunter, to do like weird stuff with damage that's impacting me as well as them. That's fun. I like this a lot, actually. So if a source you control would deal damage to you, you put that many +1/+1 counters on Auntie Blyte. So if it's a situation where, she could get freaking huge. And on top of that, you could choose to just shock your face. Like, that's an option. I could see like a Boros deck that runs cards like Lightning Helix, where you deal damage and gain life equal to the damage dealt. So like you net 0, you just put a bunch of counters on Blight. Like that could be fun if, well, I don't know. Because then you just have a really big flyer, which you can do a lot. And people don't expect large flyers coming out of red. I mean, other than dragons, I suppose. But I don't know. There's synergy here. There is a trick here. I just haven't quite found it. I think Pestilence, like in a Rakdos deck, this as part of the 99, using cards like Pestilence, where you're able to just blast the whole board, including your face. This card actually becomes really good. So yeah, I think it's really solid because she just grows. She's a flyer, and you can even turn those +1/+1 counters into direct damage that you can launch. That could just be a fireball at your opponent's face. I mean, sometimes that's exactly what you need. So cool card. I like it. Yeah, very interesting. All right, next up, Brazen Cannonade. I've noticed a lot of brazen cards recently. That seems to be an adjective that Wizards is really enjoying. In any event, Brazen Cannonade is an enchantment for 3 and a red. Whenever an attacking creature you control dies, Brazen Cannonade deals 2 damage to each opponent. Okay? With Raid, at the beginning of your post-combat main phase, if you attack with a creature this turn, exile the top card of your library until end of combat. On your next turn, you may play that card. Huh. That's weird timing on that. Most compulsive draws say until the end of this turn or the end of your next turn. So this is the end of combat on your next turn. So you need to either play it. So this is the beginning of your post-combat main phase. So you get it for 1 whole turn cycle. So in your post-combat main, so you've attacked, then you exile the top card. You can either play it right then, you can hold it up for all of your opponent's turns, or you can use it before combat or during combat on your turn. The moment it gets to your post-combat main phase, if you didn't attack with anybody that turn and Cannonade's still there, you then, like, the card's gone and that's it. If you did attack with somebody, the card just replaces itself with whatever the next one is. So it gives you, like, card advantage. It also gives you a bonus if your attacking creatures die. So, like, that's awesome, actually. Like, for aggro decks, that is super powerful. Because, like, I'm attacking you with 10 1/1s. right? Like in a Krenko kind of situation. Like I've created a ton of these little 1/1 tokens. Assuming even I'm not buffing them in any way, I'm just attacking you with a whole bunch of 1/1s. Like, if you block any of them, unless you have a bunch of 0 power creatures, if you block them, they deal double damage to you. Like, if you either have a choice of letting this 1/1 through and poking you for 1, or you block it, kill it, and it hits you for 2. Like, you kind of lose either way. Now, if you block it and kill it, it's not their next turn. So, like, over the course of the game, that might still be correct, but in the moment, it feels really bad. And I like that. Yeah, this is super cool. And if your creatures die in combat for any other reason, you can do neat things with it. Also note, if you're familiar with Arena or MTG Online, you may not know this because those interfaces kind of struggle to really show this. There is a moment... In Arena, you have to go to full control to take advantage of it. There is a moment after combat damage before you go to your post-combat main phase. There is an end of combat step. In that moment, all the creatures are still considered attacking creatures. The reason that you may be aware of that is the time where you want to sacrifice your decay zombies before they die, if you're running with decay tokens. That could also be relevant here. If you have a situation where you can like sacrifice any number of creatures to do a thing, like a Plumb the Forbidden style effect, where you can like sacrifice a ton of creatures for some benefit. If you get in for damage, your opponent chooses not to block because they didn't want to trigger this. You get in for all the damage upon all your attacking creatures. You go to that end step. You then cast out a Plumb the Forbidden or Corpse Cobble if you want to get fancy and weird. You sacrifice your whole board while they are still considered attacking creatures, and you deal 2 damage for every creature sacrificed, and then you get whatever benefit the spell has. That's power, and it's 2 damage to each opponent. So even the person you just hit. Like if you're, again, a commander pod situation, the person you just hit took a ton of damage and they're about to take a ton more and everybody else takes a ton of damage too. Like that could be an incredibly powerful way to end a game. So if you're in go wide aggro, if red is in the mix, this is 100%. Like this should be part of your game plan. This card is great. And it's just drawing you an additional card each turn. Like worst case scenario, because you want to be attacking anyway. Yeah, this card's really good. I dig it. Coalborn Entity. This is an elemental for 4 and a red for a 4/4 elemental. And you can pay 2 and a red. Coalborn Entity deals 1 damage to target creature, token, player, or planeswalker. So you can't hit non-token creatures, which is kind of weird, but you can hit pretty much everything else. It's fine, I guess. A 4/4 for 5 is not really where I want to be. And 3 mana for 1 damage is not a particularly good rate. Now you can repeat it, and you don't tap the elemental, so you can use it as many times as you want. So that's kind of nice. So if your opponent has a bunch of creature tokens online, being able to just ping them down one after another. All right, there's value in that for sure. So it's interesting. I don't hate this card, but at the same time, it's also not doing a ton. Being able to just do direct damage to your opponent's face is nice though. That's always good. So. Yeah. I want effects that can amplify damage in some way, or effects that can reduce the cost of the activation the activation. Like that's really where I want to be. So again, we've mentioned it before, like Zerta, being able to turn this down so that it's just 1 red, deal 1 damage. That's all of a sudden really good. That could become a machine gun that can really mess up your opponent. Add something like a Torbrand or a Mechanized Warfare where you add additional damage to each one of those pings, like. That's a lot. So, that could add up pretty fast. So, there's a place for it. There's a time and a place for this card. All right, next up, we have Daring Piracy. This is an enchantment for 2 and a red. At the beginning of combat on your turn, create a 1/1 red pirate creature token with Menace and Haste. Exile it at the beginning of the next end step. Menace and Haste is real, and it's a fully expendable 1/1. So you get a 1/1 every single turn that you can attack with. The fact that you exile it at the beginning of the next end step and not sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step is a big deal. In a deck that can take advantage of having additional bodies on board, usually through sacrificing them, this is actually pretty solid. Being able to just pump out a token every turn is a big deal. It is. Yeah, like you can do a lot with that. And a 1/1 red pirate with menace and haste. I mean, yeah, you get to attack with it. It's got menace. You might get in for 1 damage. And if you're in a situation where you have like, pirate synergies, you might be able to take advantage of this in cool ways. So I think it's fine. Like, it's decent. I really want to be running this if I can sacrifice the pirate for value. If I have some recurring sack outlet that I can pour those pirates into to really get the value out of it, then this becomes really good. If not, it's just fine. Yeah. Yeah, if you're just getting combat damage out of this, it's not worth it. But if you can use this as fuel for an engine, then you're in good shape. All right, next up, Goblin Researcher. This is a Goblin Wizard 3/3 for 3 and a red. When Goblin Researcher enters the battlefield, exile the top card of your library. During any turn you attacked with Goblin Researcher, you may play that card. So you get to see what the card is. Everyone does. And then if you attack with Goblin Researcher, you can play that card. I don't think 1 card is worth it. And a 3/3 for 4 is behind curve enough that I think it's going to hurt. Yeah, Goblin decks don't want this. There are better ways to draw cards. And, like, mid-range decks don't really want it either. It's because there are better ways to draw cards. You get that card under a lot of, like, stipulations. If this gets removed, that card is gone. Like, if you have to block with this, it's not even like your opponent has to, like, blow it out, because, like, worst case scenario, you get to play 1 card on your next turn. Like, depending on what that card is, that might be really valuable, but chances are it's not really going to be worth it. So, to be honest, I think this card is actually really bad. In a limited environment, maybe it'll be okay, but, like, in Commander, absolutely not. Like, this is a no-go for me. All right, next up, we have Mizzix, Replica Rider. So it's not the first time we've seen Mizzix. Yeah, Mizzix is pretty good, as it turns out. But anyway, legendary creature, Goblin Wizard. 4 and a red for a 4/5 with flying. So decent rate already. Whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, you may pay 1 hybrid blue-red. If you do, copy that spell, and you may choose new targets for the copy. If the copy is a permanent spell, it gains haste. At the beginning of your end step, sacrifice is permanent. Being able to copy any spell is awesome. And being able to, that's awesome. So you can copy flashback spells, you can copy disturb spells, you can copy any spell you're playing off the top of your library with cards like Reality Chip, Future Sight, one with the multiverse, you name it. Like, you can do some crazy things with this. Also, casting cards out of exile, which is not hard to do. Like, actually, that goblin we were just looking at that I just said wasn't very good, does trigger this. So, all right. Like, impulsive draw effects, like the bombardment we were looking at earlier. Like, this is actually really good. Like, this effect is very strong. Being able to pay 2 and just copy anything you're playing, like, not anything you're playing ever, but, like, if you're building a deck around this, you're going to be playing off the top of your library. You're going to be playing cards out of exile. You're going to be playing cards out of your graveyard. Like, this becomes really, really good. Like, really good. It is valuable that the permanents, you get hasty copies, and you have to sack them at the end of turn. So that does kind of temper it a little bit. Like, you could attack with a creature that wouldn't otherwise be able to on the first turn, which is nice. And you do get double ETBs, so that's nice too. But, you do sacrifice it. So if you're casting just a big creature, that's just nice because it's big, then, yeah, you can pay 2, you can copy that big creature, but it's going to be good for 1 attack, and then you're going to be left with just the other creature. So it's probably still worth it, but yeah, I think this card's actually just really good. If you're looking for an Isu Spellslinger commander that has like a little twist on some of the other stuff we've seen, it's actually pretty solid. I like it. And there are a lot of decks that are able to play off the top. If you can play off the top of your library, this card's insane. Like, absolutely insane. Next up, we have Ogre Battlecaster. This is another rare. This is an Ogre Shaman 3/3 for 3, 2 and a red. With First Strike, already worth the price of admission. We have a novel of text here, though, so let's see what we got. Whenever Ogre Battlecaster attacks, you may cast target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard by paying red, in addition to its other costs. If that spell would be put into a graveyard, exile it instead. When you cast the spell, Ogre Battlecaster gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is that spell's mana value. Get out of town. This is how red does Snapcaster Mage. Yeah, blue does Snapcaster Mage at instant speed. Red's a little more expensive, but it's also hitting you in the face with First Strike. This card is actually really, really good. Being able to flashback burn spells is going to be massive. So there are going to be a ton of situations in which this is relevant. And on top of that, like, you do have to pay the costs, so that's a thing. But imagine a situation where you have Mizzix down and Ogre Battlecaster, you attack, you target the lightning bolt in your graveyard. You pay the 2 for Battlecaster, you can now cast it. You pay the 1 to cast the lightning bolt itself, and then you pay 2 to copy it. Now, yeah, you've just invested 5 mana, but you get 6 damage, and you can divide that across multiple things, and then Ogre Battlecaster is a 4/3 First Striker attacking. So that's like one scenario. And let's be honest, you're going to remove 2 creatures most of the time, or deal 6 damage directly to your opponent's life total. Like, that's really good. Now, granted, yeah, Lightning Bolt's a good card. I'm not breaking headlines. I'm not, like, that's not crazy breaking news. But still, like, I think this card's actually really solid. And again, Commander, definitely Commander. But it's like, yeah, giving all your cards flashback. I mean, when red can reuse burn spells or impulsive draw spells out of the graveyard, good things happen. And yeah, this is very powerful. So this wants to be aggressive. Like, you definitely want to be in an aggressive situation. So running burns is probably where you want to be. Yeah, and being able to attack and then reuse, just double dip on all your instant sorceries. I like it. That's really good. All right, next up, Plundering Predator. The alliteration is strong with this set. We have a 3/3 dragon for 4 and a red with flying. When it enters the battlefield, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. This card sucks. Sorry. It does. So rummaging on an ETB effect like this, being able to discard a card and draw a card, is very, very good. It is, but it's good on like a 2-drop or ideally like a 1-drop. You know, it's good on cheap creatures early because it can set up late game plans that require certain cards in your graveyard or require you to have certain combo pieces in hand by helping you just dig to them. Having it on a 5-drop is like, it could be fine if the rest of the creature was worth it, but a 3/3 flyer for 5 is not. A dragon is a great creature type. But a 3/3 for 5, even with flying nowadays, is just unplayable. Like, it's just too bad. This is like a limited card at best. So again, in the Jumpstart pack, given the power level of some of the common like Jumpstart cards that we've seen, I wouldn't be surprised if it's fine. There are plenty of games where just getting a 3/3 flyer down is going to win you a game of limited. All right, fine. But in any constructed format, including Commander, this card is really bad. Like, just bad. Sorry, just is what it is. Next up, Benevolent Hydra. We are into green. Benevolent Hydra is a 1/1 Hydra for X green. I have a feeling it's not going to stay a 1/1 for very long. Benevolent Hydra enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. Crazy, right? If one or more +1/+1 counters would be put on another creature you control, that many +1 +1/+1 counter put on it instead. Oh, cool. Then tap, remove a 1/1 counter from Benevolent Hydra, put a +1/+1 counter on another target creature you control. Oh, that's awesome. So you can dump a bunch of mana into this. It enters the battlefield with a ton of +1/+1 counters on it. Neat. You have a big Hydra. Cool. That alone probably worth the price of admission. Having big Hydras is nice. And then, so you have this big Hydra that you can block with. So it's just this big, like, I don't know, 6/6, 7/7 Hydra, just chilling, being a 6/6, 7/7 Hydra. And then on your end step, you can tap, remove a +1/+1 counter from it, and then put a +1/+1 counter on another creature, but because of the static ability, that other creature gets 2 +1/+1 counters on it. So you have a hardened scales on a Hydra that can then move its counters around and just buff up the counters on everything else as a direct result. This is actually a really cool design. I like this a lot. Actually, this is a great card if you're in a Commander situation that cares about +1/+1 counters. And then you also add like hardened scales, Doubling Season, Vorinclex Monstrous Raider, any kind of situation where you can like further amplify the number of counters that you're putting on your stuff. Like, this could be tap, remove a +1/+1 counter from Benevolent Hydra, put 4 +1/+1 counters on another creature you control. Like, it could get out of hand fast. And that's great because you want your stuff to be getting huge. So yeah, I think this card's actually really good. And on top of that, you can put it in like Simic decks where you can have like untap target permanent effects, QRS followers, Pem and Zoras, that kind of thing. And all of a sudden you can like be just twiddling the Benevolent Hydra and your team is just getting absolutely massive. That's fun. It requires a little setup. It requires the situation to be just right. But if you can do it, it's cool and it's fun. Like, again, this is the kind of like build around where you do have to jump through some hoops, but it can provide an interesting effect on a board that your opponents have to interact with in some way. That's exactly what I want out of my commander cards. So I like it. I think this card is actually pretty good. Next up, Giant Ladybug. This is a 4/1 insect for 2 and a green with reach. When Giant Ladybug enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, then shuffle, and put that card on top. Of all the ways to like make sure you hit your land drops, that's about as bad as it gets. Grabbing a basic land and putting it on top is definitely not where you want to be 99% of the time. Because yes, you want to be able to hit your land drops. That is very important. And so ensuring that you draw a land, it's fine, but you spent a card to do that. Which in general, I would say is not worth it. And so what else are we getting? We're getting a 4/1 reacher for 3. A 4-power reach creature is nothing to sneeze at because you have, like, your opponents can't attack. Like, there are a lot of decent flyers that are like 4/4s or 5/4s that they just can't attack with now because the Ladybug is going to stop them. So, all right, that's something. Like, that's not nothing. It's real. Problem is with only 1 toughness, this thing ties to everything. Like, your opponent's Cinderclasms, your opponent uses a Prodigal Sorcerer, just tap, this thing's gone. Like, that's not good. Like, that's really bad, actually. So I don't like this card. I don't love it. Like, hitting your land drops is very important, and if I absolutely have to put a creature on the battlefield in order to make sure I draw a land, I will. But in a world where there are 2-drop creatures that put lands directly onto the battlefield, like Sakura Tri-Builder, I'm not running Giant Ladybug. I'm just not. It just doesn't do enough. Yeah. Unfortunate, but is what it is. Next up, Kibo, Uktabi Prince. Now, I've talked about this card before to the point where I've actually devoted an entire video to Kibo, so definitely check that out if you haven't already. But in short, this card's great. If you want to run monkeys and apes in Commander, this is your Commander. Period. End of discussion. Put the hands down. This is it. Kibo is awesome. It's like kind of group hug, but it punishes your opponents for using the thing that you give them. You literally hand them a banana. So anyway, let me just read it. It's a 2/2 for 3, 2 and a green. Legendary creature, Monkey Noble. Tap, each player creates a colorless artifact token named Banana. With tap, sacrifice this artifact, add red or green, you gain 2 life. So you're giving your opponent something that gives them a little bit of mana and a little bit of life. Here, have Banana. That's just nice, right? Whenever an artifact an opponent controls is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control that's an ape or a monkey. That includes Kibo, and hopefully your whole team if you're running, with this tribal. And there are a lot of really good apes and monkeys out there. Like Kogla the Titan Ape or the Simian Simian Simulacrum. There's the Ancient Silverback. Like, I think Wizards knew this card was coming, so they like printed a number of cards that were just like good green or red cards, and they just happened to make them apes just cause. And yeah, it works really nicely with this guy, obviously. But then whenever Kibo attacks, defending player sacrifices an artifact. So at the very least, Kibo will eat their banana. But if they have other artifacts, Kibo will eat those too. It's great. Kibo's great. I love this card. It's just awesome. Like, this is another one of those actually. Like, I was talking about that Vampire Angel earlier. Like, I might want to build Kibo too. This card's really, it's just fun. It's just fun. And it's an under-supported creature type that now gets a commander. That's going to be really good. That fits the identity of that creature type. Sick. Love it. Next up, Mild-Mannered Librarian. This is a 1/1 human for 1 green. You can pay 3 and a green. Mild-Mannered Librarian becomes a werewolf. Put 2 1/1 counters on it, and you draw a card. Activate only once. So, you get a 1/1 human for 1, and you can pay 4 to make it a 3/3 werewolf that has 2 +++ counter, and you draw a card to replace a card. There are better werewolves than this. It is a decent 1-drop though, so that's something. It's also weird that it becomes a werewolf until the end of the game, but it doesn't transform. Like every other werewolf that is a human that becomes a werewolf, like it's printed as a double face card and it literally flips. That is not the case here. And what you end up getting is you spend 5 mana. Like if they printed a card, that was 3 green for a 3/3 human werewolf. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card. I would say that card's not great outside of limited, and you probably shouldn't run it. And that's kind of what we have here. Yeah, now if you blink this, it is only a 1-drop, so like if you have cards that care about the actual mana value of your creatures, accounting as 1 is potentially relevant. I don't know. At the end of the day, like I gotta do some mental gymnastics to justify putting this card in a deck. So I feel like at the end of the day, that means you probably shouldn't put it in a deck. You know, in the plus and minus counter deck where you have cards like the Benevolent Hydra and Hardened Scales, the werewolf is going to be bigger than a 3/3, so that's something, but that's still not worth it. There are better creatures out there that can get plus and counters. Next up, Primeval Herald. This is an elf scout. This is a 3/1 for 3 and a green with trample. Whenever Primeval Herald enters the battlefield or attacks, you may search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. This is more like what I'm talking about. So it's a 3/1 trample for 4. It is an elf and a scout, which are 2 tribes that I keep saying tribes and tribal. I know that's becoming a taboo topic, and I try to avoid it. I'm sorry. It's a habit. I apologize. I don't mean to be... I'm sorry if anyone out there it takes offense to those phrases. I'm trying. I promise. In any event, Primeval Herald, elf is a creature type that is vastly supported, wildly supported, going all the way back to the beginning of Magic. It has been a just go-to creature type since the beginning of the game, and it has never stopped being supported. So in an elf deck, that's actually decent. So, but then also getting a Rampant Growth style effect just for playing it is fine. Already, a 3/1 trampling elf for 4 that ETBs and you go grab a basic and put it on the battlefield. That's already fine. The fact that it then triggers again every time you attack with it is pretty sweet. And any elf that has trample on it is already better than it looks, because elves buff each other up. When you have one elf, there are like so many elves throughout the course of time that say all elves you control get +1/+1. There are more elf lords than I can count. And so Primeval Herald, by the time you're actually playing Primeval Herald in a dedicated elf deck, it's not going to be a 3/1. Like, it's going to be a 5/3 or a 6/4. Like, it just is. So that having trample is very, very strong. And then being able to grab lands is also very, very good. Now, elves also have better ways to ramp than this, to be perfectly frank. They just do. So I feel like this card, assuming Jumpstart 2022 is printed at a relatively high volume, this looks like a budget elf card to me. If you're running a budget commander elf deck and you just want a decent elf that can help fill out the 4-drop slot, Primeval Herald actually looks pretty good, because it's going to be getting you additional mana. It's going to be thinning your deck some, not much, but you know, hey, we take what we can get. Also, if you are running multicolor for any reason, if you're trying to build like Naya elves, for example, all of a sudden this can help reload this can help fix your colors, which is nice. But in like a straight mono green elf situation, it does the job. Is it better than like Circle of Dreams Druid? Absolutely not. But I don't know. It's not bad. All right, next up. Rampaging Growth. This is an instant for 3 and a green. It says search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle. Till end of turn, that land becomes a 4/3 insect creature token with reach and haste. It's still a land. I kind of love this, actually. Now, this reads very badly. Like it reads like it's a very, very bad card. It's got a couple things going for it, though. It's an instant. So for 3 and a green, you can just run this out. So if your opponent could attack into you and you have 4 lands up, you can cast this, search your library for a land, it enters untapped. You now have a 4/3 insect online with reach that can block whatever's coming in at you. So you can kill one of their things with your ramp spell that like ramps you, assuming the 4/3 survives combat. Like, that's like having a sneak block mode or even a sneak attack mode on the ramp spell you were gonna play anyway. It's kind of awesome. Like, I really dig that. Yeah, and the fact that it's a creature with haste that is untapped means that if you bring it onto the field, and like if you grab a forest, put it onto the battlefield, you could declare it as a blocker and then tap it for green mana that you can then use to cast like Giant Growth to turn it into a 7/6 until end of turn. So those kind of lines are available here in cool ways. Like, this is a neat card. Like, is it great? Not necessarily, but you're gonna get some people with this and it's gonna be fun. Yeah, I like it. This is a fun card. Next up, Runadi Behemoth Caller. This is a 1/3 cat shaman for 2 and a green, legendary. Whenever you cast a creature spell with mana value 5 or greater, that creature enters the battlefield with X additional +1/+1 counters on it, where X is its mana value -4. Creatures control with 3 or more +1/+1 counters on them have haste. Interesting. Mana value -4. So you cast a 5-drop, it comes in with 1 counter on it. You cast a 6-drop, comes in with 2. 7 drops comes in with 3, etc., etc. Interesting. So it's a neat idea. It also has a mana ability, so it does tap for green, which is nice. So the creature ramps you, so it helps you hit the big stuff, which is great. And then some of that big stuff also has haste. So the card's not bad, but I also don't think it's great. The one deck where I really want to run this, though, the deck where I really want to run this is Radadraga. Radadraga, the Gorgut boss, is a Gruul commander that gives all your creatures with mana abilities +2/+2, and they untap when they attack, so they like have pseudo vigilance. So Runadi would benefit from that. And then there's also an added ability whenever you cast a spell with mana value 7 or more, you can untap stuff and put counters on it. So, or no, it gets +7/+7 till end of turn. It's not counters. But Runadi all of a sudden gives you additional payoffs for casting the big creatures that trigger Radadraga. So you're casting big creatures that trigger Radadraga. And then you're also giving those big creatures that you're casting an additional power boost and haste. I'm seeing an insane amount of synergy there, which is awesome. So this is like this card, Runadi, is all about getting to gigantic monsters. You want to be rocking Ulamog. You want to be dropping 10 drops with this thing. Like, that's where you want to be. So this is like a commander for an Eldrazi deck, if I ever saw one. Or, yeah, like I said, Radadraga. There's a ton of synergies there. Because you want to be playing huge spells in Radadraga anyway, so make them creatures. Boom. Like, yeah, you're doing great work. Also, just that static. Creatures with 3 or more +1/+1 counters on them have haste. There are a ton of creatures with X in their mana value where they enter the battlefield with X counters. Various Hydras and like Stonecoil Serpents and Nugan's Conjurants, and the list goes on. Tons of them throughout the course of the game. Take advantage of those. Like, because those are entering with counters on them. That's big time. Big time. Yeah, really good stuff. I like it. Yeah, if you like casting big creatures, Runadi's got your back. Next up, Spectral Hunt Caller. This is a 4/4 Wolf Spirit for 4 and a green. You can pay 5 and a green. Creatures you control go +1/+1 and gain trample until end of turn. This is a limited card if I ever saw one. Having a 4/4 for 5 is fine, but not particularly good. And then having an activated ability that costs 6, you will be doing that in limited. You will never do that in constructed. Like, almost never. So I don't think this is going to make it, even in Commander. Like, giving everything trample is noteworthy. Excuse me. Been talking for a while. Giving everything trample is noteworthy, and +1/+1 is not nothing, but 6 mana is a ton. There are better overruns than this. There are just so many better overruns than this. Next up, Towering Gibbon. Whoa, that artwork is awesome. All right. So this is an ape, 3 and a green for a *4 with reach. Towering Gibbon's power is equal to the greatest mana value among creatures you control. That's interesting. So if you're running big creatures, if you're running 7/8 drop creatures, this Towering Gibbon is going to be pretty massive. And it has reach, because as we can see, the Towering Gibbon is climbing a building, which I kind of love. It looks like a scene out of like Godzilla, except it's an adorable gibbon instead of like the gigantic gorilla, which is fun. This also definitely gives me vibes from like the Midway Classic Rampage. If you've not spent entirely too much time playing Rampage, then I'm sorry. You and I have different childhoods. And yeah, so that's the vibe this gives me, which is just fun. It's like nice and nostalgic. But I mean, this is a strictly better Giant Spider, is really what it is. Because Giant Spider is a 2/4 reach for 4. And that's exactly what it is. It's a classic card that's been around forever. Towering Gibbon sees itself. It does check itself. So at the very least, it's a 4/4. It's a 4/4 reach for 4. That's already actually just really good. It's just good on rate. It's also an ape. So if you're running Kibo, it synergizes. It works in that deck beautifully. So actually, I think this card is just really good. It's just an efficient green creature. That has the opportunity to get a really big power late in the game that can swat pesky flyers down on defense and also attack for just some big damage that your opponent has to do something about. So I think this card's really good. This is definitely going in Kibo decks for forever. Like it's a good ape. It does the thing. Next up, Zask, Skittering Swarmlord. That is a difficult name to say. You got a 5/5 insect for 3 green. Legendary. You may play lands and cast insect spells from your graveyard. Oh, you had me at graveyard. Whenever another insect you control dies, put it on the bottom of its owner's library, then mill 2 cards. Interesting. Pay 1 hybrid Golgari, so black or green. Target insect gets +1/+0 and gains Death Touch until end of turn. So this is definitely an insect. If you're running if you're running a commander deck based around insects as a creature type. So if you're building an insect themed deck, Zask is an awesome commander. It also would fit nicely if you're running it alongside. There are a couple of other insect theme cards out there. That would fit alongside this. Like, insects are one of those creature types that there have just been a ton of insects printed throughout the history of the game, but most of them are like utility creatures that support other archetypes, or they're just like vanilla forgettables. But there aren't very many just good insect payoffs, and I think this qualifies. So this is a weird set of statics. So you can play lands and cast insects from your graveyard. That's amazing. Being able to take advantage of your graveyard in that way on a 5-drop that is a 5/5. I mean, that's efficiency right there. You love it. So being able to hit your land drops out of your graveyard, like Raminep Excavator is already an excellent card. So okay, let's take that and then crank it to 11 by also giving you insect spells. So any insect that's in your graveyard, you can then cast it. That's amazing. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that also lets you cast Grist, the Hunger Tide, who is in fact a Planeswalker. Because when Grist is not in your hand, they are an insect creature. So as far as Zask is concerned, it would see Grist in the graveyard as an insect and let you play it. I'm pretty confident that's how that works. And then whenever another insect you control dies, put it on the bottom of its owner's library, and then mill 2 cards. So, unfortunately, you don't reload your graveyard because they go to the bottom of your library, but you then mill. So you do reload your graveyard if you have more insects. So if you have filled your deck with insects, then Zask is going to be loading your graveyard full of insects every time one of your insects dies. And then on top of that, for 2, you can give any insect +1/+0 and Death Touch. So if you have a little 1/1, if you have a virus beetle, for example, a little 1/1 insect that has some ETB, neat, right? Okay, cool. You have it back. Your opponent attacks into it. You activate Zask. You now have a 2/1 Death Toucher down. So you kill whatever attacked in, and your virus beetle dies. It then goes to the bottom of your library, and you mill 2. If you mill an insect, Zask then allows you to play that insect out of your graveyard. Dope. Like, that's awesome. And then when that insect dies, you get to mill some more. Like, this actually is really cool. I like this card a lot. If you add other mill effects, if you add, like, you can do some really cool things with this. So the question comes down to, are insects good enough? I don't know, to be honest. That's a good question. You know, earlier I was looking at the Rat Commander saying, like, that rats just aren't good enough. Well, I happen to know rats fairly well. I don't really know insects. I know there are a number of good insects that have been printed. Like, Grist is the only one I can think of that, like, synergizes with insects. It's also, like, just really good. But But if you don't have Grist, then Zask, I think, is a non-starter. I would definitely want to put those two together, big time. Which one is the commander and which one's in the 99? I don't know, to be honest. That's a really good question. But I want to try it. I want to try that a lot, actually. I think that has potential. I like it. Yeah, Zask, I think, is a really cool design. This is a really neat card. And it's supporting a creature type that hasn't seen a lot of support. So, I dig it. Next up. Dutiful Replicator. We are now onto artifacts and colorless. So Dutiful Replicator is a 3/2 artifact creature assembly worker for 3. When it ETBs, you may pay 1 colorless, generic. When you do, create a token that's a copy of target token you control, not named Dutiful Replicator. Huh. If you're in a situation where you have a lot of tokens, I mean, worst case scenario, realistically, this is going to be a 4 mana 3/2 that creates a treasure token. That's not bad. Like, I don't love it, but I don't hate it. If you're in another situation where you've created like a token copy of a Colossal Dreadmaw, like a 6/6 Trampler, being able to pay 1 and just get another one of those, yeah, that seems pretty good. Like, you can do a lot with that. And there are a ton of cards out there right now that create token copies of various permanents. And so this you can just create a token that's a copy of a thing. Now, it can't be named Dutiful Replicator, so you can't make a token copy of this that then triggers, and then you can make another token copy of the token copy. Like, it doesn't like feed itself infinitely, which would not be that hard to pull off, to be honest. Any kind of effect that creates mana when things enter, like, could very easily get out of hand with that. Fortunately, they saw that and cut off the infinite combo there, but all the same, if you have big, powerful tokens, this is actually a pretty good way to, leverage those. It's very situational. So, yeah, I would definitely only put it in commander decks that are capable of generating tokens in at least like 10 different ways. At least, to be honest. If you like in a commander deck, to be honest, given that you're running like 100 cards, especially if your commander is not a token generating card, like if your commander can create like powerful tokens, that this is a good way to just get an additional one. That's neat. But if you're not doing that, like your deck probably should have like at least 20 token generators, and the tokens better be big enough and valuable enough that spending 4 mana for a copy of one is meaningful. You do also get a 3/2 body for the process, but all the same. Like, this is a kind of effect on like a generic common that I think actually could be pretty good in the right circumstance. So, neat stuff. I like it. Next up, Infernal Idol. This is an artifact for 3. Tap, add 1 black to your mana pool. Or you can pay 1 black, tap, sacrifice Infernal Idol. You may draw 2 cards, and you lose 2 life. So as far as mana rocks go, I don't love 3-drop mana rocks in general, but they become kind of industry standard, if you will. They're kind of go-tos. The fact that it only taps for black is a huge bummer. There are a ton of 3-drop. One of the big benefits of 3-drop mana rocks over 2-drop mana rocks is most of them tap for mana of any color. I mean, even something as simple as Darksteel Ingot, which was kind of like the first like 3 mana tap, create one of any color mana rock that really, like, at least the first one I became aware of. That was fine. Like, it's indestructible, which is like a neat little thing, but not amazing. And that's like, you don't even see that getting played right now. So the fact that this can only tap for black is a real bummer. So you need to take advantage of that last ability. Being able to like cash this in for cards later is something. But if you're not in mono black, I wouldn't even think of this. I would pass on it every single time. And I don't know what kind of mono black deck is going to be rocking 3 mana rocks. And any mono black deck that is running like a 3 mana rock probably has better ways to draw cards. So I don't love this. This is like budget commander build at best. I don't see this getting played with any regularity. Yeah, I actually really, the more I look at it, the less I like it. Cool art though. Next up, Instruments of War. This is an artifact with flash for 4. As Instruments of War enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1. That's actually really cool. This is pretty solid. It's giving any creature type +1/+1 on a 4-drop is already fine. You know, it's a glorious anthem that keys in on the creature type. Cool. Like, that's already fine. The fact that it flashes in is really cool. So you can attack, your opponent can align their blocks based on what they think are the best situations. And then all of a sudden, all their combat math goes out the window because your whole team gets buffed. Neat. Like, that's a really cool combat trick. Same can be done defensively. If your opponent's swinging into you and your team is just, girded, ready for battle, ready to block, you can pay 4, drop it. That's actually really cool. And the fact that it's colorless means that you can rock it with no matter what creature type your deck is built around. If you are running a deck that is built around having a lot of a certain creature type. So this could be elves, this could be rats, this could be... elves probably have better ways to do this effect, to be honest. But if you're running, like, rats or insects, this actually is probably going to be really good. So I like this. This is actually a really neat card. It's good stuff. Yeah, let's go. Yeah, even if you just hold up other forms of interaction, like removal and counter spells and stuff, if you hold that up and then they don't play anything, you just throw this down, just buff your squad on their end step, and then you go. Like, Flash is great. Flash is a really good keyword. All right, next up, and this is actually going to be the last card we talk about today. This is Planar Atlas. This is an artifact for 2. It enters the battlefield tapped. When Planar Atlas enters the battlefield, you may look at the top 4 cards of your library. If you do, reveal up to 1 land card from among them. Then put that card on the top of your library and the rest on the bottom in a random order. Now, I was just talking about how putting land cards on top to ensure your land drops is not great. However, in this context, I actually think this card is really, really good. Because the other part of it, it's a mana rock. It taps for colorless, which, whatever, but it only costs 2. It's a mana rock for 2. Mind Stone is already a phenomenal card. Even Guardian Idol is a really solid card, just because it's mana ramp for any color at 2. Mana ramp at 2 is a big, big deal, and a lot of decks out there want it. So the fact that Planar Atlas is not only ramping you by getting you additional mana on your 2-drop, the fact that it is so it's giving you that which was already worth the price of admission, and then loading up a land that you had in the top 4 cards to make sure that you draw into another land. And in Commander, in the early turns, drawing land is almost never a problem, in my experience, because you can always draw your action later. Most Commander games, at least most casual Commander games, the first couple of turns are pretty chill, and things aren't really happening yet, as everyone is kind of sculpting their hand and molding their board. That's one of the big differences of Commander versus, 60-card competitive formats, is you have time. You have time to breathe, and you're trying to do big stuff later, not necessarily like blitz onto the board immediately. Heck, in certain pods, blitzing onto the board immediately actually means that you get hurt the most when somebody actually hits the board wipe and resets everything. So in a lot of cases, being a little slower, being a little more deliberate, and setting up your mana base is a huge deal. And Planar Atlas gives you that. So as far as casual Commander goes, actually, I think this card is like super good. Like, I really like it, especially if you're in like a 2 or even 1 color deck. Like, monocolor decks or 2-color decks, the fact that it's colorless mana is fine. Like, that's not a big deal. Actually, but even then, you can make an argument that if you're running 3 or 4 colors, or even 5, you are finding any land. It's not just basics. So you take any land from the top 4 cards and set it on top. So that can help fix your mana. Like, if you see 2 lands there, take the one of the color that you need. Or you can make sure that you get a duel out of it, or whatever the case may be. So, like, I think this card is actually shockingly good. As far as Commander goes, this is a great 2-mana rock. Absolutely fantastic. So, yeah, good stuff. I like it a lot. And hopefully, this also reeks to me of a mana rock that Wizards is probably going to reprint on the ground. I will be shocked if we don't see Planar Atlas. By this time next year, I will be absolutely shocked if Planar Atlas is not reprinted, I don't know, twice, like in various pre-cons and stuff. I'd be absolutely shocked. This is like the utility card of the set that like most decks can use. And when Wizards prints one of those, they usually print a lot of them. So we see Arcane Signets, we see Soul Rings even, which is kind of taking on that mantle. Granted, that wasn't its initial intent, but it's kind of what it's become in Commander. Like, those cards do get reprinted a lot, and they need to be, because demand will be high. So, yeah, good stuff. So thanks so much for checking out the video. Thanks for making it all the way to the end. It means a huge... I mean, I cannot tell you how much it means because I've been sitting here yammering for 2 hours at you, and you're still here. So thank you. You've joined the elite few that have made it all the way to the end of this video. I'm not seeing the retention stats, but I know 2 hours on YouTube, it's a big commitment. So thank you. Appreciate you. I hope you're having a phenomenal day. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. I do post regularly, and they're not usually this long-winded. Although sometimes they are, let's be honest. But thank you again. And yeah, like, subscribe. I also stream over on Twitch, by the way, twitch.tv/hamhocks42. I'm over there 5 days a week. I absolutely adore it. If you want to see me play an arena and getting a little salty or trying to do some goofy thing and then getting a little frumpy when it doesn't work, I got you. That's one of the many services I offer. So thank you so much. And yeah, I will catch you on the next one, everybody.